So in this Falcon 4 BMS tutorial, I'm going to walk you through how to use the FCR, or Fire Control Radar. The FCR is used to lock up targets both in the air and on the ground. For purposes of this tutorial, I'm just going to go over the using it to lock up air targets. So, where is the FCR? By default, it's going to be on your left multifunction display, or MFD, which is on the left side of your cockpit. So, we're talking about this guy right here. And the FCR has many features. We're not going to go over everything, we're just going to go over the basics. So, the main things that you're going to be looking at is you have at the top left of the FCR where it says 40, that's the default range. That is telling you how far the radar is scanning, okay? The closer the radar beam is, the lower the altitude you can scan. The farther away something is, the easier it is to detect. And what you should do is you should imagine the radar as a sort of searchlight or a beam coming out, and it's really thin the closer you are to the aircraft, and it spreads out, okay? So you use these buttons here to increase or decrease the radar range. Under that are some buttons that will customize how wide the radar beam is. Don't worry about that. The bottom left, right here, these 6 digits in white numbers, that is the bullseye of the target at the radar cursor. Below that is your current bullseye. Now in the center here, we see this blue artificial horizon, and then we also have these 2 vertical white lines. That's your radar selector, or radar cursor, or radar designator, whatever you want to call it. That's what you slew around using your arrow keys to lock up targets. Now, there's 2 sets of numbers to the right side of the radar cursor. There is, on the top in white, is the maximum altitude that you can scan at, and at the bottom in red is the minimum altitude that you can scan at. And you can increase and decrease the range by pressing F5 and F7 respectively, which is to raise or to decrease your antenna tilt. So the antenna tilt controls the altitude in which you can scan. It does not control the range. The range, as I went over before, is by the top left number here. That's the range. Now on the right side of the FCR, these are data link controls. Okay. Now each number corresponds to the person to the player in your flight, or the aircraft in your flight. So 1 would be the flight lead, 2 would be his wingman, 3 would be the Element 2 leader, and 4 would be his wingman. And what the coolest thing about it is that you can actually, if you lock something up on the FCR, you can instantly send the position of that contact to anyone in your flight by clicking on these buttons. So if you locked up a bandit, it's inbound or whatever, you can lock it up and then press, let's say you're the flight lead and you wanted your wingman to see it for whatever reason, you click 2. It will say data on his screen, and he'll instantly see it on his FCR. Now, what's another important feature of this screen is these top buttons here. Most of them are irrelevant. You don't really need to worry about it. The most important one is where it says RWS, okay? That is telling you the radar mode. There's multiple modes, okay? RWS stands for range while scan, and it has the fastest update rate, and it has the largest cone area. But it does not provide any situational information, unlike another mode called TWS, or track while scan. So if you were to click on these buttons, which I can't do right now because I have the game paused, it would switch between various radar modes. The only ones that we're going to cover right now is RWS and TWS, because they're the most used radar modes, and they're something you're going to use constantly. RWS is if you want to get a target, if you want to acquire a target quickly, you don't have time for TWS. TWS, in my opinion, is the best mode for general usage. because unlike RWS, where radar contacts will just show up as white squares, on TWS, up to 10 targets will be automatically soft locked by your radar, and what that does, it will tell you their attitude or bearing, and it will tell you their attitude and altitude. Okay? And that's really good for situational awareness, because just by glancing at it, you can tell if an enemy aircraft is turned in on you, is flying away, stuff like that. You know, and the altitude is always really important, because if they're really low, you know that you're about to lose them, perhaps. And this is all things that you wouldn't get on RWS unless you soft locked various contacts. That's the basics of the anatomy of the FCR. Now we're going to go over. Now we're just going to go over using it in practice. So I'm going to unpause the game. So I have some large sort of lumbering air contacts over here. They're bombers. Yeah, they're over here. Okay, now what we've done here is we've locked up a bomber that is off bore side right now. I'm going to go ahead and turn on my HMCS for a moment so I can show you where it is. It's right there. Oh, do I not have I might not have HMCS in this model. Okay, I don't have HMCS, but it's right there, if you can see it. It's a bomber or some sort of, yeah, it's a Tu-87 Bear, it looks like. Now I locked that up, and the reason why I did that is I want to show you some symbology here on the FCR. Now, what you're seeing is a number of things, okay? These blue vertical lines show you what your radar is currently scanning. So when I pressed TMS up to lock up the target, the radar beam shortens so it can acquire the target and you can get some more information. Now, see these white squares? Those are radar contacts. We don't know what altitude they're at. We don't know anything because we're in RWS. Now, if you slew your radar onto them and press TMS up, you'll lock onto them. Okay? Now, when you lock onto the target, it turns from these white squares into this yellow triangle. And the yellow triangle has a line coming out of it on one side of the triangle, on one edge of the triangle. That is showing you where the nose of the aircraft is. So right now, you can see this is like a triangle facing, down left, which means it's flying sort of towards me, but also to a flank. Okay? And the number to the right, or the number under it, 10, that's the altitude of the target. The number to the right of that, where it says 05 in blue, that's the minimum altitude. So let's say this target starts diving. I won't be able to, if he dives below 5,000, I'm going to start losing him. And at that point, this would flash red, and there'd be X's across it. So that's just for your own situational awareness. This circle here and all this stuff, this is for the AIM-RAM, which I'm going to go over in a moment. We're going to get back to that in a moment. Let's go over the numbers at the top. These are really important. So this top right number here, where it says plus 51K, that is the closure rate. And what a closure rate is, it's how fast you're approaching or moving away from the target. So if it's positive, then you're moving towards the target. If it's negative, you're moving away from the target. Now, it's in knots. So right now I'm closing on this target at 512 knots. Okay? The number to the left of that is the target's airspeed in knots. So it's going at 379 knots. The number all the way to the left, where it says 270, that is the heading of the aircraft in degrees magnetic. So this, it's pretty obvious to see. This is a really good example, actually. Since he's turned, down left, he's on exact 270 bearing. Now, if I were to get closer to this guy, if I were to get closer to this guy, I might know what sort of aircraft he is, because if you hard lock or TMS up twice a air contact, this space here might be filled in with some information, and that's because the radar can interrogate contacts, which means it can basically scan them and determine what they are. It's not really reliable, but it can save your ass sometimes, because if you don't have time to declare a target with AWACS to see if it's hostile, and you don't really have time to visually look at it, you can lock it up and then it might tell you what it is. So if you see these, air contacts that are flying towards you going like with 900 knots of closure distance, they're probably hostile, but you need to make sure before you fire. So it might say like MiG-29 might pop up in that space, and then you know it's hostile. You don't even need to declare it. Now let's go to the HUD for a moment. So when you lock something up on the radar, the range for the target is going to be right here, it's F0101.1, which means it's 10.1 nautical miles away. We're going to go over the other symbology on the HUD in regards to the FCR once we go over the AIMRAM, which we're about to do. So let's unpause the sim and let's switch it into TWS mode and quickly go over that. So I'm going to come down here, I'm going to click where it says RWS. Oh, I do have HMCS, so it just paused, so it didn't update. I forgot about that. Okay, now we're in TWS mode. Okay. What you're going to find now in TWS mode is that all these targets, they appear as if they're locked up, because they are being locked up by my radar. They're all being soft locked. They're all being soft locked, up to 10 radar contacts, and I can see the relative bearing of all of them, and I can see their altitude. This is extremely, extremely useful information. So you're going to want to keep in TWS mode. Oh, one disadvantage of TWS mode is that not only does it refresh slower, but it also has a thinner radar beam, and because of that, the altitudes that you can scan would be significantly lower than RWS. See, right now we can scan between 14,000 and 5,000 on this contact. Now, if I switch it, I'm going to switch it to RWS, and you're going to see how it's going to change. $12,000 and 5,000 compared to 12,000 and 7,000 for the RWS. So now let's go over the AIMRAMs. Okay, so I'm going to switch back